Hey there, sheepdogs. Welcome to the Sheepdogs Union. Today I wanted to do a bit of a response video to a video that Military Arms Channel put out a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago, I don't know, where Tim compared 38 Special, 9mm, and 357 Magnum out of 3 different guns. And it was a very interesting and compelling comparison, a lot of useful information there, but I think he got a little bit of the physics wrong. So I wanted to kind of cover that and discuss it. So one of the big things I think a lot of people don't realize is that there is a distribution of performance for any given caliber. So just because you have the same bullet weight doesn't mean you have the same situation. So basically one of the things that I did, Lucky Gunner did a comprehensive study. I mean, not super comprehensive. They tested a whole bunch of defensive loads in 380, 9mm, 45 ACP. I think they also did 40, but I don't care about 40. And then they also recently did 38 Special and 357 Magnum, and the revolver cartridges, they included 2 different barrel lengths as well. So I took all that data and I put it into a spreadsheet. And basically what I found is that, your 380 is your lowest power on average, and these are averages. 380 is lowest, and a little bit above that you get 38 Special out of 2-inch barrel, and then a little bit above that, kind of right in between 380 and 9mm, you get 38 Special out of a 4-inch barrel, and then you got 9mm, and then a little bit above 9mm is 45, and a little bit above that is 357 out of a 2-inch barrel, and then a ways above that you get 357 out of a 4-inch barrel. But the thing is that there is substantial overlap between all of the ranges. So basically the top 20% of 9mm loads outperform the bottom 30% of 357 Magnum loads out of a 2-inch barrel. So one of the things that Tim found was he had a 124 grain 9mm and 125 grain 357 Magnum, and the Magnum was all of like 10 feet per second faster than the 9mm. And so he came to the conclusion, 357 Magnum and 9mm give you the same power. Well, that particular load out of that particular gun in 9mm and that particular load out of that particular gun in 357 were the same, but the averages are very skewed. So the average 357 is still substantially more powerful than the average 9mm, and a top performing 357 Magnum is vastly more powerful than a top performing 9mm, because the distribution is a little wider on the 357 than it is on the 9mm, because the automatic cartridges, they have to keep the recoil impulse relatively close within a certain range, so you're limited in how much energy you can actually punch out of that cartridge because it still has to cycle normally in a gun. Whereas with a revolver cartridge, as long as your pressure is within the SAMI specs, you're fine. So there's generally a wider range of loadings in the revolver cartridges than there is in the automatic cartridges. So the other thing he found, which I found very interesting, was that I think it was a Glock 43 and an LCR, both chambered in 9mm. And what he found was that the 2-inch revolver and the 2 3/4-inch automatic yielded about the same velocity, which is something I actually was not expecting. But that does make sense. The loss in velocity, it does it's linear. So if you look at, I know on revolver cartridges, I haven't looked at it in automatic cartridges, but on where I've been able to find data on revolver cartridges, from like 4 inches to 15 inches, it's pretty much linear in terms of velocity versus barrel length. But you start to get under 3-4 inches, and that curve drops off precipitously. And so a 2-inch barrel could be half the energy of a 4-inch barrel. And so that is actually what the data shows that I've looked at, is that the 2-inch barrel gives you about half of the 4-inch barrel. But that's not the only variable. One of the variables, that the reason that everybody was expecting the revolver to give a lower velocity than the automatic was cylinder gap. But when you're looking at a short barrel like that, it's not as big of an issue, because basically the cylinder gap allows the pressure in the barrel to drop faster once the powder stops burning than it would in an automatic. But the powder's, when you have a short barrel, the powder's still burning the whole time. So you're basically pegged at your maximum pressure for the whole time that the bullet's in the barrel, regardless of what your cylinder gap is, as long as it's not, obscenely huge. So that's probably why the revolver and the Glock gave pretty much the same results with the same load, which is cool. It makes me feel a little better about carrying my revolver. The other thing is that's not the only variable as well. So I've also picked up other data as far as people shooting the same load out of 2 different revolvers. So one of the examples I recall was an LCR versus an SP101. And even though the SP101 has a 3/8 of an inch longer barrel, the LCR actually produced a higher velocity. And so one of the things that's different is what's your bore diameter, is how much friction is in the barrel. So if the SP101 has a tighter barrel than the LCR, then you're going to get a lower velocity. And again, that effect's going to be more pronounced in a revolver than an auto loader, because you do have that vent in the barrel, and so you're not, in an automatic, if your barrel's tighter, then that's going to feed back into the burning of the powder, and you're going to get higher pressure as a result. And you will get that to a certain extent in a revolver as well, but it's not, since there's somewhere for the gases to go, you're going to have more of an influence from bore to bore. Even rifling pattern, things like that can affect how much friction there is on that bullet, and that'll affect your velocity. So the other thing is that he compared 9mm out of a Glock, and then 9mm out of an LCR to 357 Magnum out of an air weight. Now, so two points. So he came to the conclusion that the Glock and the air weight are about the same weight, and the felt recoil was so much worse on the air weight than on the Glock, and they basically produced the same muzzle energy. And he said, you're getting the same amount of power with less recoil, and that's not how it works. So the recoil impulse is directly proportional to the momentum of the bullet, so the mass times velocity, for a given firearm. So if he had, so he really should have done the comparison between the LCR and 9mm and the LCR and 357 Magnum if he's going to compare calibers in terms of use, because the LCR and 9mm and 357 Magnum is basically identical. The only difference is the chamber cuts. So basically what it boils down to is that the air weight is a terrible gun in terms of recoil management, because you have the same weight bullet going the same velocity. So the amount of recoil impulse going into the gun across those 3 platforms should be basically identical. But because the air weight is lighter, and it's a revolver, so there's nothing moving to distribute the force anywhere. You're going to get a very sharp felt recoil. The other thing that does is when you start getting into really, really low weight guns, you're actually going to start to lose velocity because the amount of energy you get out of that bullet is fixed. And the percentage of that energy that's going into the bullet is a function of the mass ratio between the bullet and the gun. And if you have a very, very lightweight gun, like an airweight, and you're doing 357 Magnum, you're going to start to lose some of that energy that instead of going into the bullet is now going into the gun and breaking your thumb. So that's another thing to consider. But that, for a given amount of power, an automatic is always going to give you less felt recoil than a revolver because the force is being transmitted to your hand through the recoil spring and other things that basically is going to smooth out that transfer of energy, which is going to make it feel less harsh, even though it's the same amount of energy. And the LCR in particular this is one of the things I like about Ruger revolvers, is they have rubber grips that are flexible. And so even though the LCR and the airweight are about the same weight, and they're both revolvers, they both don't have any moving parts to absorb the recoil, the LCR is able to move relative to its grip, which allows that to dissipate some of the energy more slowly and transmit it more slowly into your hand, which makes it a much more comfortable gun to shoot. So even though you're technically your recoil impulse is the same, it's more comfortable when it's coming out of the LCR. So there is no way to get less recoil without losing energy for a given bullet weight. You can get, if you have a lighter bullet going faster, you're going to get more energy. You're going to get more energy per recoil impulse, but you can't cheat those. You can't cheat those physics, and so basically, I agree with his conclusions about the advantages of a revolver, and I like the idea of the 9mm revolver from the standpoint of having cheap ammo to shoot. And I was very happy to see that there was not a significant difference in the velocity between the short-barreled automatic and the short-barreled revolver with the same load. I would be interested to see ballistics gel performance and see if those, because you are losing velocity from even in an automatic. A shorter barrel does eat into your velocity no matter what. It's just revolvers tend to have a wider range of barrel lengths, so they're more known for that being an issue. But the issue is exactly the same in an automatic. The difference is that there's fewer barrel lengths to choose from in automatics, and so the perception is out there that it's not an issue, but it's still an issue. So very encouraging that the LCR gave similar performance to the Glock 43, but I'm not totally sold that a Glock 43 is going to give you the same performance as a Glock 19 in terms of actual terminal ballistics, because you are still losing a significant amount of velocity, which is going to hinder your performance. So, do your math when you're evaluating guns and ammo, and revolvers are great, even in automatic calibers, and but also remember that there's significant variability within given calibers. So just because example A of caliber A outperformed example B of caliber B does not mean that caliber A is always superior to caliber B. There's, like I said, there's substantial overlap. The overlap between 9mm and 45 is huge. So the bottom performing 9mm and the bottom performing 45 are about the same. The average is a little higher on 45, but then because the distribution on 45 is wider than on 9mm, again, because you have more bullet weights being loaded in 45. The actual performance window is wider, so the top performing 45 is way better than the top performing 9mm, but the average 45 is slightly better than the average 9mm. So always remember that any given loading is not representative of the caliber, and that a single point comparison isn't going to be adequate. So that's basically what I think happened. Is he managed to pick a top performing 9mm and a bottom performing 357 Magnum, and turns out that you get the same performance out of those two, but the average 357 Magnum is still far better than the average 9mm. So yeah. Keep that in mind as you make your decisions about what and how to carry, and always remember to be ready to be somebody else's miracle. And I will see you next time.